consideration of Girvan Road. That's what the entitle of the paper is, but in fact talks about other things as well. Thank you. Yeah.
Good evening. So this report is a response to the Urban Form and Transport Development Committee on the 23rd of July, which asked staff to report back on the actions resulting from the councillors' meeting with members of the community, and also to assess and report back on options to put the bus facility for Arataki on the St John site on Girvan Road. So I'll take the paper as read, and I'm happy to give a brief summary of what's included within that paper. So in terms of the outcomes from the councillor meeting with members of the community, several items, as you'll see in the paper, have already been addressed, and others are in train. Within the long-term future of this bus facility, we are clear that we need to address some of these longer-term issues that can't be addressed in the short term. In terms of Girvan Road, we've looked at this option through three lenses, basically. So we've looked at the planning context in terms of the Reserves Act and also the existing use from St John. We've looked at the technical feasibility, which includes whether there's enough space for a bus interchange and whether it can be accessed safely both by buses and pedestrians and users of the facility. And we've reviewed it from a passenger perspective. So in terms of planning and feasibility, we've identified that it is potentially possible to use this location as a bus facility. It is currently zoned as a recreation reserve, so there are two options to change the status of that reserve or to revoke its status as a reserve. Both of those options are complex but not infeasible. Arguably, some of this the change in status would need to occur anyway to allow an ongoing lease arrangement with St John. From a technical feasibility point of view, we think that it could possibly be feasible. There is enough space. Access issues have some safety issues and some other issues to overcome, but these could possibly be designed out. From a passenger perspective, there are a number of network issues. It's not ideal for passengers. And buses would still need to use Farm Street. We are currently undertaking a survey with bus passengers, which I can update on shortly. Moving on from the report, we have been working with Bayfair. We know that they're finalising their current expansion, and they're looking at what they're likely to do as a next stage. The conversation with Bayfair has been positive. We've got some similar outcomes that we're trying to achieve. We've undertaken some constraints mapping with Bayfair and identified some sites for further review. We'll be meeting with them again within the next few weeks. In terms of the survey of bus users, we've had staff going out on site and interviewing users directly at the bus interchange in an online survey through SurveyMonkey. Currently, we're sitting at around 260 responses. The majority of people that we've spoken to are regular weekday users, and many of them also use the facility on the weekend. Roughly 80% of people that we've talked to are commuting to school or work from this facility, with 30% using Bayfair shopping or eating at that location. So obviously 80 and 30 don't add up, and I'm sure someone was probably going to point that out to me. So what that talks to is that people are actually using this interchange for multiple uses. So they're commuting to work, and on the way home they're grabbing something to eat from the mall or doing a little bit of shopping, and that's something certainly that is of a benefit to Bayfair too. The majority of people are walking to the site, with some cycling or being dropped off, with a number of transfers. We do know from the most recent boarding data from Regional Council that over the last 6 months, boarding numbers on a monthly basis have been between 26 and 30,000 a month. So roughly 900 users a day are using the facility at Farm Street to access services. Roughly around 30% of those people are transferring. 78% of users are not happy to walk more than around 400 metres from the current location. So we asked people we asked them about the amount of time they would spend walking from the current location, because that's a more real prospect to people. So 42% said that they were not willing to walk more than 2 minutes, and 36% said they would be willing to walk between 2 and 5 minutes, which roughly equates to about 400 metres. So that summarises the update. I'm happy to take any questions.
Probably want to try and cut to the chase here before I go into the questions. I think that we've had that consultation or engagement with the residents, but I don't think that's it. I think that was just the beginning. So I want to see something that takes the information that you've just given us, and I want to sit down in the room with a couple of councillors, a couple of Farm Street representatives, and if you like, a couple of bus users and staff, and nut this thing out. This is going to go nowhere very fast unless we actually do that. And proper consideration being given to both sides. And then we just might be able to get an agreement as to what the best side is. I just feel that at the moment we're a bit premature going down the route that we're going. And I would have thought with doing this with the residents, a bit like we did before, with all the information in the room about the survey, that just would be the way to go. So I'm going to now take questions, but I'm just trying to preempt something. Yeah, Christine.
Can I clarify what the resolution is seeking here? So what we're saying is that Girvan Road is still a viable option, but that we need to do further work on Bayfair to see whether Bayfair can be a viable option, and then I think then you're in the type of position that you're talking about. We're not there yet, so we're still working with Bayfair to understand where it could possibly go and how that would work. And then we may have two options that we can then go and talk to the community. At the moment, we've got a Girvan Road option because it's owned by council that has some possibilities but also some issues and some risks. And we've got a possibility not yet confirmed or finalised in terms of an option at Bayfair. So what we're saying here is we leave this sitting here, we carry on with the Bayfair site work, and then once that either reaches a conclusion that it is a potential or reaches a conclusion that it's not possible, that's when we come back and that's when we start to have a conversation with the community, because at the moment we're not quite there.
It's just that Dee says that we continue working with Bayfair with the aim of reaching an agreement for a bus facility, and I suspect that the people in Farm Street feel that that is some sort of a decision, and I just want to do this right. I think we made that, we repaired a lot of damage that was done, and I get the feeling I want to do it the right way this time.
So through the chair, it may be that that's not worded
Certainly
to
isn't.
reflect what we're trying to do,
Yeah.
which is to get a point where we've got an agreement, which we then it becomes a viable option because clearly it's not our land, and then at that point, then we can have further conversations. So it may be that we need to rephrase that, because G talks about continue to update and engage with the community on progress towards a permanent bus facility, and so that's certainly not we're not saying that if the discussion with Bayfair is positive, that that's a foregone conclusion. It becomes an option that we can come back to both the elected members and the community and have the conversation. So we may need to reword D.
I think we need to reword the
Yep.
lot, actually, because it gives that impression, and I don't want to go down that track. Councillor Robson, these are questions or vague
This is a
comments?
question, but I have been fed, so I'm no longer tired. One of the issues we had with Durham Street was we had two projects running in parallel, and they clashed at times. So the university were doing their stuff and we were doing the street stuff, and every so often those two contracts, which weren't designed to work together, would clash. One of the issues we have with PT is our work on infrastructure and regional councils' work with bus routes, etc., sometimes clash. At this morning's PT meeting, the issue about the dropping patronage in the eastern suburbs, Papamoa and Mount Maunganui, was raised, and staff acknowledged that one of the issues, probably, they mentioned it more than twice, was the way the system requires transfers. This was part of a significant shift. I'd raised the issue previously, but now there was information provided by Joe that supported the position that transfers may be impacting on patronage. In fact, that was the only part of the network where we had a fall in patronage, 9% fall in adult patronage. As a result of this, there were some recommendations that were originally drafted by staff at Regional Council were modified. You were there. Do you have a copy of those so we could share the decisions of Regional Council with elected members? The reason being is that it would be kind of crazy if we were hearing off down and there was some discussion about facilities, interchanges, what are we calling this stuff? And they were looking at possibly changing to a more direct type bus service, which may significantly reduce the need for transfers and an interchange. And this comes back to, are we joined up? Now, I was at that meeting, I was at that table. I spoke more often than Larry would have liked, but it was in response to questions.
Part of that was about the fact that the facilities at that interchange were substandard, and that was creating a problem for people as well.
That was a small part of the conversation. The majority of it was around transfers.
No, I don't have that information with me. We can ask Regional Council to provide that and provide that back to councillors. What we do know with regard to transfers, though, is that Bayfair is and will continue to be, regardless of whether people have to transfer there, one of the most significant destinations for public transport in the city. So we need to provide a facility at or near Bayfair in that Arataki area. The survey that we've carried out has borne that out in the sense that a lot of people that are using this facility are from that local area, accessing public transport to the Mount Papamoa or to the CBD. So we know that 70% of those people are either travelling to Bayfair or travelling to their home in that area. It will continue to be a destination that we need to serve regardless of the transfer issue.
Absolutely. And further to the meeting this morning, while there are some rethinking going on, it is the inadequacy of the facilities that are contributing, because people are either transferring and standing in the rain, or all crowding into one bus shelter, or are joining a bus there, and in the wet weather they are struggling. But the other issue is the timing that it's going to take. Can I ask, the option of Girvan Road, you know, you've said it's not impossible, but what kind of time frame, and it may be hard to answer, but you know, we've been down the reserve revocation thing and all of this. I believe the residents of Farm Street want a solution as fast as possible off the street, and that's what we should be addressing. Which one is going to get us there quicker?
So the advice that we've received in terms of changing the reserve status is that that would be likely around 12 months. But that's not to say that the Bayfair site would be particularly easy. We would still have to go, because it's not a permitted activity to have a bus interchange on that site, we would still have to go through a consenting and hearings process for that. In terms of the number of buses travelling up and down Farm Street, one of the things that Regional Council have told us is that because there is no ability for their buses to turn within the interchange location, they're having to run buses up Farm Street and back down Farm Street and around Leander Street. If we had a facility either at Bayfair or somewhere else in the area where they can turn around, they expect that they would be able to half the number of buses going up and down Farm Street in the short term.
Which is the point that I was making, that the sooner we have a facility that can accommodate all that, the less buses there'll be on Farm Street, and the less buses there'll be on Leander Street, the next one, which is also a concern. So I can't see anything wrong with the resolution myself. But
I think, I've got Councillor Stewart, and then I'm potentially prepared to try and move something. But Councillor Stewart and
Thank
Councillor
you.
Robson. Morris.
Thank you. I went to that PT meeting too, and definitely the transfers are an issue. But just on D in our agenda, through the chair, to Claire, are you able to give us more information how the conversations are going with Bayfair, or is that still in early stages?
So the conversations with Bayfair have been positive. We're working together. Bayfair see the benefit of public transport to their site and to their customer base, and equally we see the benefit of having a good public transport facility in that area. So arguably we're working towards the same aims. We've worked on some early constraints mapping with them, and we're working on some early options based around a few sites that could work within their complex. And we'll continue to have those conversations, but currently the conversations have been productive and positive.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in terms of an alternate resolution to what the recommendation is on in the agenda, if C was deleted, which is around the noting the technical work is still preferred. Now, that may be the recommendation that's come from the technical advice, but in terms of the wording, council will decide what it prefers. And then, of course, reworded D. And I would also make the comment, sometimes it's easier not to have notes, you know, what we are noting, rather what we are actually deciding is sometimes better. Turning it into a question, what's your thoughts on that?
Might be hard for staff to.
No,
yeah.
that's right. Oh, okay. So you absolutely can remove the notes if you wish to. If you wanted to reword D, I think maybe something along the lines of think it through, but with the aim of determining whether a bus facility on land owned by Bayfair is a viable option and report back to council. Well, that's what we're intending to do. So.
The other thing I'd suggest too is if you're going to keep the notes in, if you note that a change of reserve status is needed for Arataki, then you need to note that a resource consent is needed, which will be, and I can assure you, there'll be pressure for that to be opened up far and wide because it will have effects on neighbours. So but whichever way we go, we will have serious consenting issues to overcome. Councillor Robson.
I think my desire at this stage is that we treat the options scrupulously equally. We show no indication of favouritism or predetermination in the process with regard to one option. So we look at the pros and the cons. We do two technical. We treat the wishes of the Farm Street people with full respect. That would be my preference. If someone's rewording a motion, I want to be able to read it and not identify a preference, right? And I want to be able to have a conversation with the Farm Street people without any hint of predetermination. I would repeat the point I also made earlier, that we need to make sure that we have all the information on the table in front of us, and I believe where Regional Council were heading this morning is part of the information that's required. And as an exclamation point, we have already today been in the situation of making a decision without all the information. It doesn't take us to a good place. Where Regional Council are going and what they're thinking, they're partners to this. We need to know what they're doing.
I guess we're not asking questions now, we're sort of having a bit of a loose discussion.
Round to get
And that's
to try
fine,
and,
that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
clarifying that I'm within your rules. I think it's possible to have resolutions that are impartial, so there's no indication of a preference, but still that we do not necessarily have to advance both at the same time with the expense involved in that, because I think that it makes sense to get on with the discussions with AMP and find out whether that's viable, and then look at the other. No, if AMP know that the other is still an option, it's a good tension in the commercial discussions, but we don't have to go and investigate everything at Girvan Road straight away. I don't believe it. I think, but I do agree with Councillor Robson that the resolution that was out in the public shows no preference whatsoever, and we don't have one. We're just we're just working this one. This one's ready to go at the right time. Can't see why we'd want to do both at the same time.
My major concern is the connecting and communicating and listening and engaging with the Arataki community. I know we've got Jen on board doing a great job. I would hate to see G removed. I'd rather see G reworded to be that council direct staff to continue to engage first and update the Arataki community on options and progress towards a permanent facility for Arataki, and it shouldn't be last, it should be first, because that community has to come first. And engaging with them and updating is, in my mind, the top priority.
Not to harp on about it too much, but I believe there are pros and cons for each of those locations, and obviously the need to get a resource consent was not mentioned in here, but the need to get one at Arataki through it was. Now, I believe at Arataki, you will need to pay a lease. Be very interesting to see how that goes. The other place you won't. So there are pros and cons, and I just think I want the community to feel that they're being consulted and engaged with properly. And I think this is an unfortunate resolution. So I want to get it right. And I'm not going to be led by other people saying, oh no, do it. You know, I'm making a stand here. Councillor Malloy.
Just going down a side track briefly, before we get close to a resolution, we've got a number of big problems here. One is that we're probably not going to get facilities for 3 years. Could be earlier, but there is a possibility it'll be 3 years. In the meantime, it's putting pressure on the patronage that we want in the buses to get people off the roads, etc., etc. So it's a considerable restriction there. And then the other one is the service to the community. We've got members of our community standing around in the rain and without shelter. Once again, it's a disincentive, and it's also not helping our community. And I think, I don't know how you'd look at it, but I think 2 to 3 years is probably reasonable. But I don't think our community should be left standing out in the rain basically for 2 years. And I just wondered about the possibility of temporary bus shelters that we could put together and get out there. And we could get those out there. I mean, we've got a number of places. You've got Brookfield, you've got Arataki, CBD's pretty well catered for. You've got Greaton and Welcome Bay. All of those areas, you could put temporary bus shelters there. What I'm thinking of, but I'm certain there's others, is that containerised bus shelters. You know, they can do quite a reasonable job of making something look pretty presentable, and they could be put in place relatively easy. I just wondered whether that's
I think we need to stick to the topic of which is the consideration of Girvan Road as an option for an Arataki bus shelter. You can flag that at another meeting then.
Staff can speak to bus shelters at Arataki if you wanted us to speak to that in terms of the interim options that we're looking at. I'll do that.
Once again, I would like that discussed with the group with which we say we're going to consult and engage. And if it hasn't been, let's do it together. There's no point in saying it now.
Through the chair.
Sorry, I thought it was good. You go first.
So that's included within the options for all the community concerns in Arataki, and one of the things that came up. So one of the things we're going to do is to put in 2 extra shelters at either end of that bus facility that's there at the moment. We can't put bus shelters in the middle because there is a very narrow footpath there, and we can't widen that footpath because of a high voltage power line that sits in the berm behind us. There's some challenging things in there, but we will put in extra shelters as part of the next stage of this project.
Can I just ask which side of the road?
On the Bayfair side of the road. So the other side, Regional Council are currently using that stop as only a drop-off, and it's not a stop now that people have to wait at. So that negates, because we couldn't get a shelter in there under the Local Government Act, we have to consult with the adjacent landowner and get their permission, and the adjacent landowner did not want to give their permission.
So traffic heading to Papamoa will actually still wait on the Bayfair side because they go around the block now, don't they? Thank you.
Councillor Stewart and Councillor Robson.
Thank you. Page 119 says that the results of the survey intend to be tabled at this meeting. Are they available for us? We heard them verbally, but
Yes, so I can provide some early results documented if
any
you
written?
yes, so the survey is still open and we can't provide some of that cross-examination of answers. So we can provide an overview of what we've got so far, which is based on around 260 responses.
What?
I'd have to come back and confirm that, but I believe it's open for another week.
Okay.
Bishop, just clarification, really. Are you intending to move a motion? You indicated you were going to take a stand and you were
Yes.
insistent on what was going to be in it, so I
Yeah.
assume you're drafting a motion, is that correct?
I am fiddling around with some words, yes.
Okay, I await that.
Much to your horror. So you've got, yeah, because if I may start working through, obviously we received the report. The second thing, as kindly suggested by Councillor Brown, that we, well, this may become redundant according to what I'm going to move. I want to move that a working group consisting of Arataki community representatives, councillors and staff be established to work through all the issues and information to determine the location of the Arataki bus, to recommend to council the location of the Arataki bus facility. Now, therefore, you could leave in B, you could, I don't know whether you need all those other things, and if you're going to note anything, you better note that a resource consent or a reserve revocation is required at any of the locations. Yeah. That would be fair, wouldn't it? Yeah. Or would you just leave it out? Yes.
Is a resolution required for staff to continue to work with Bay Fair, or is that business as usual? So we don't need to say anything, eh? Eh?
And it's there is that we were asked to report back on the option of Girvan. If the elected members didn't want to continue with the Bay Fair option, then we wouldn't continue the discussions with Bay Fair. So what we're reporting back is, as your request, is Girvan a viable option? We're saying yes, it is a viable option. The staff recommendation is that you pursue options to get to a point whether they either stack or they don't, and that at that point, then you assess pros and cons of all of the options and make a decision as to which one you want to proceed with. At the moment, because Bay Fair is privately owned land, we don't know whether we can get to a point whether that is a viable option and what that would look like. So you've got currently, you can't make the assessment, but we do need a direction as to whether you want us to continue with those discussions with Bay Fair or not. So the previous resolution that you passed instructed us to do that, and then you also instructed us to look at Girvan.
It's expired,
No, it still
so
stands.
it's still
yeah.
there.
Councillor Robson.
My understanding, there's two elements of the discussion around the Farm Street / Bay Fair adjacent option. One is determining, you know, the availability and time frame, if you like, getting the site, and then there's a technical assessment that sort of can follow that, in a sense, in the same way that we can determine whether we can get hold of the Girvan site, and then there's a technical assessment that follows that. So I suppose what I'm asking is, do we need to do a technical assessment to have discussions with Bay Fair and confirm basically availability, terms by which we can access that site, and at that point we can go to the community and say, look, we've got two sites, this is where we are, both of them we can get to. What we want to do now is to go and assess them technically. This is going to cost this much money, this is going to take this much time, we'll look at the pros and cons and we'll bring all of that back to you, the community, and share it with you. That's sort of my view on how you proceed. So do we need to commit to the technical stuff on the Bay Fair Farm Street option at this stage, or rather spend the resource on just clarifying whether they're both viable and getting back to the community? Because I think it's that check-in with the community at every step is what we're trying to get to here.
So that is what we're proposing, but you need to do enough technical work to be able to define the footprint and to work with Bay Fair to say, here's how the buses would flow and here's the turning loops you need, because without that, they can't understand what the impact on their business would be, and therefore the pros and cons of them agreeing to particular parts of their site. So just as you've seen, we've put on the agenda here the traffic flow or the turning for Girvan, which has got the layout plans of different options about how the bus would be able to move in and out of. the movements. We'd be doing the same on the options that we are looking at with Bayfair. That would help them form a conclusion as to whether they are comfortable with one or more sites on their particular site. That will then rule in or out, and then we'll have those options to take to the community for a conversation. And that's really what we're looking for here, and apologies if that's not clear enough in the report.
Thank you. That helps, thank you.
I haven't sat here all day not to say anything. I just wanted to reassure councillors that constant engagement is ongoing with the community. In fact, this afternoon I spoke to the petition organiser just to check in, and we did an e-news this week. I think we also need to remember when we're talking about the bus facility that there is wider stakeholders than just Farm Street residents, and so it's quite a tricky one, and it will take quite a lot of effort to, which is partly why we were engaging with bus users as well. We've got to widely engage with our community. Thank you. Oh, and
No
then
problem.
one last thing, sorry, Larry, just an answer to your question about they want us to hurry up. Actually, the word I'm getting from Farm Street people is don't hurry up and do a quick and dirty job, do it properly and come up with the right option.
Okay, and that would also, I mean, when we're having this group, because I do think tossing things around in a group is a good idea, then obviously bus user representatives too. But the idea of just backwards and forwards, it doesn't work. That meeting we had the other day was a good start, I believe. Councillor Robson and Councillor Brown.
So I appreciate the long wait and the need to say something to make sure your day is not wasted. But I'm in receipt of an email, I think most of my colleagues are as well, from David Henderson, commenting on earlier comments by Stephen Bird, and we know both of those people well. There has not been, second sentence in, there has not been any further discussion with residents, which is a concern. As residents, we should know who's making these decisions and how and what they're measuring and making this. Anyway, so I suppose what I'm getting direct from the community is messages of, hey, look, we don't feel we're being checked in enough. Whether we think we're doing a good job or not is one point, but this was dated Monday the 9th. So maybe it's early and maybe everything's changed since then, but the message there is we're not checking in enough. And so if I phone David tonight, sure he's in here somewhere, what would he tell me? It's all good?
Well, I'm not sure. I did speak to him this afternoon though, and remind him that there was the meeting happening today, and just letting him know about that. And also, he did request that we have another session quite soon. I said we won't be able to have councillors at that because there won't be any councillors, but he was happy to talk to staff, so I promised him I'd follow up on that.
You phoned him to tell about the meeting. He already knew about it because they'd already been into the agenda, looked at the agenda, read the recommendations and gone, what the hell is going on here? These people are proceeding ahead. They've clearly got a predetermination because that's how they've read it, a little bit the way some of us read it. It may not have been clear enough. And Stephen's reacted, David's reacted too, and you telling him the meeting's on. I mean, we need to tell them that before the agenda comes out, not because they're across us, they're ahead of us here. So the point I'm making is that, we're not quite where we need to be, I think, in this relationship. They already know. They found out about the surprise party before we got to tell them,
Okay. Right, got to work through and try. I'll need a few minutes to get a 5-minute adjournment. Yeah. 5-minute adjournment. Yeah. Okay, we're resuming the meeting. We'll just get that blown up a bit. So this is the proposed resolution that we receive the report. We direct staff to continue to engage with and update the Arataki community on option and progress towards a permanent bus facility for the area. C, agrees that staff will continue working with Bayfair to establish the viability of facility on land owned by Bayfair as an option, continues to consider the Girvan Road site as a viable option, and progresses, once the viable options are identified, work on technical assessments, pros and cons, and community engagement. The last one may be a bit repetitive of B, but I think the emphasis is important, that the community engagement and consultation is essential. Yeah.
We agree, is that options with an S? B?
Yeah. Yeah, right, we're just one instructor at a time.
Through you, Worship, I'm just going to try and tidy those up. This
Yeah.
direct staff, agree staff are words that aren't needed. I think we'll just continue to do these.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any difference between...
Yep, you're right. Okay, and options. So second line down from where you are. Okay, so I'm happy to move it. Question?
The question is that in terms of E, that's really a two-stage process, so I'm concerned how long that's going to take. So can staff advise how long the fact we're not running those two processes side by side is going to take?
So,
So I'm not clear what your question is, what processes side by side?
Well, when I say this process, we're saying first of all we're going to find out that the projects or options are viable. Sorry, and then work on technical assessments. Like what I'm saying is, how long is it going to take?
so yes, the Bayfair work is trying to bring that up to a same level of understanding as what we have for the Arataki site, the St John site, because we control that land, so we know what access options are available, we know what footprint we have, so working with Bayfair is identifying what footprint might be available and how that might work. In terms of assessing them against each other, in terms of technical assessments, a lot of that work has been done. It would be just that more detailed layer that understands exactly how access would work and all of those things. So once the assessment is done with Bayfair, I would consider that to be a relatively short process.
Okay, so I'm prepared to move it. Got to second it. I think I've spoken enough about it and given you my reasons in the earlier part, so I will not be speaking further. Councillor Morris?
Speaking to the resolution, I think we do need to acknowledge that we are playing catch up here with the Farm Street community. I'm a bit shy to say it, but 18 months, 2 years ago, Councillor Brown and I requested that we have the type of meeting that we had a couple of months ago down there on Farm Street with the residents, and I'm pleased that we did that with the new leadership of the organisation in place. I do want to acknowledge Jen for her part in that meeting and also keeping our residents informed. Thank you. In terms of moving forward, as Councillor Robson said in the questions, we do need to be absolutely scrupulously fair and undetermined, moving and unbiased in doing this. I think that's an expectation that everybody in the community would have, and it almost goes without saying. But given that we are playing catch up here, I think we need to make it as clear as possible. So I do thank the Mayor for proposing what he has today. I think it's responded to the very valid concerns that we received via email. I also want to say to Sophia and Eve Morris, who are watching at home over dinner, please put your dishes in the dishwasher afterwards. Thank you.
Right, any other speakers? We've pretty well canvassed this topic pretty well. Okay, so no right of reply either. I'll put that all in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? So that's carried. That was an aye. It's just a time delay. So that's carried. Thank you very much. I think that's been a good step forward. Right. Moving on to our next item. trying to find the page. 160, and that concerns the Tauranga City Centre downtown initiatives.
Thank you, sir. I was confused by the DC reference. I think it's 278. I know it's late, but I have a presentation. I promise you it's to speed things up rather than just to take up more time. Great. You take my Wi-Fi. So yeah, there's Tauranga Crossing, Mega Mall. It's huge. We kind of, in terms of the workshop and the previous paper we had on this, the focus really was on retail. I'm just providing this as a bit of context that the challenges retailers face. These things are shiny, new and exciting, and people go to them in their droves at the moment, and people in our CBD are struggling, right? We were just talking about this one just then. Public transport interchange near what is another sub-regionally relevant shopping mall centre. These things are made up of fine-grained retail, A-grade space, and massive anchor tenants. You know, we've got a massive anchor tenant in our CBD, but it is in that state at the moment. It'll be back one day, but it is really tough for retailers in the CBD. You know, there's business, you know, commercial business and office activity that still happens, but retail is struggling and a lot of tenancies are vacant. So that was the context that we arrived here saying, what can we do for the immediate pain that retailers are going through in the CBD? That's kind of the main focus here. Yeah, there's council does do its bit. There's we bring people to the CBD with things like the tidal steps and events, and great decision before to create this kind of destination as well. There's this is for this to point to the coffee festival a couple of weeks ago. Events like this do bring people in, but it's a long game, as Gareth Wallace said at our workshop, to develop those complex carbohydrates that actually bring people here day in, day out, and from which then the retailers would benefit. So maybe we need some sugar hits to go with our complex carbohydrates. And this list of 9 initiatives kind of covers a lot of stuff, and we worked through that at the workshop. I think you've had notes from that workshop tabled today. Yes, and hopefully that's an accurate record of the discussion. What I'm just going to do here is flick through a few slides to kind of consolidate where we got to in that workshop and hopefully most efficiently steer the discussion towards maybe a resolution decision of that. So yeah, there we were all in this room talking with retailers, Downtown Tauranga members, and basically we got to the point where on this list we realised that was done. Replacing the Winter Lights event with something of similar calibre and scale this side of Christmas, maybe. Approve foundation funding for activate vacant spaces, maybe. Introduce rates relief, generally no. Obviously if people are seriously demonstrably affected by our stuff, yes, but generally no. Same with LTOs. Advertising care package for the city, continuing from the care package that Downtown Tauranga will be running over the next few months, maybe. Introduce free buses into the city centre, maybe. Approve funding to advertise those free buses, free parking and free Saturday parking, maybe. And another maybe in terms of setting up a joint project team. So, and just in terms of timeframes, most of those are actually short timeframe things that we could do, but what I've suggested there, the free buses and advertising those, because I'll show you in a minute why I think that possibly fits into not the immediate term, but something that might take a few months perhaps, or rather over the next year. Other stuff, parking, it came up a lot. It's really important, and that's a maybe as well. And again, short to medium term. So just to kind of put all that into a bit of order, this is, in terms of the joined up approach, the joint project team, we parked that, and otherwise this is really where everything kind of fits in terms of some focus areas. Communication, you've got a marketing plan for the city, or you could promote free buses and parking, or you could do a general promotion around city centre campaign. So that those second two in the communication box would really be stuff that council could do just with our comms team and with some placement funding. The first one's really something that a marketing company, because we don't have marketing capacity in-house, could do. So downtown Tauranga, Tuscany, they're the type of entity that could do that type of work. In terms of access, you've got the free buses, promote travel planning. That was something that came out at the workshop. Reviewing the potential for introducing free parking for 1, 2 or 3 hours. That came out of the workshop. And reviewing the 3-hour time limit. That came out of the workshop as well. We talked about those events in the short term to replace winter lights. Rugby World Cup was an obvious thing. Can we do something there? Gav's team, the events team, is working on an option there. And Wheels on Waterfront, coming from Wheels at the Mount, is that something that could come to our waterfront? And of course there's the foundation funding for the Activate Vacant Spaces, which we've got a business plan for. And yeah, that was parked. So then putting that into a format where maybe we can rattle through this reasonably quickly, you've got things that are immediate term things that could start tomorrow basically, and approval is required in terms of a budget to deliver those. So in that space I've got the Activate Vacant Spaces, 100k, a marketing care package for the city centre, which would run from January through to July, a 6-month period, and includes 6k, I'm advised, of funding also to prepare the design, content, collateral, rather than just the placement cost. So that's 24k for placement and 6k for developing the material. For promoting free parking and general city centre promotion, that's something that our comms team could capably pull some very good material together. Those 5k figures are there just representing placement costs. You could really get a lot of bang for your buck with something like social media placements and such rather than radio ads and a lot of more expensive collateral. So in terms of immediate term but no additional budget is required, I have heard it on good authority from Gareth Wallace that our events team is awesome and they can look at events in the CBD as they are with the priority and the events funding and look to do something quickly, and the Rugby World Cup is one of those things they're looking into. Joint response group, we could set that up, that won't cost anything, and promoting travel planning, that's something we can do straight away with what our staff already do. In terms of the short term, and over the next year, I'm suggesting, well, you had on the 6th of December a very comprehensive report on transport initiatives to get people into the city centre, looking at things like free buses and parking and such. Funnily enough, the landscape hasn't changed a lot in terms of the things that were noted then. For example, is the ticketing system, and with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council to allow for, it was supposed to be April this year, it's looking more like April next year, so we're actually further away from that now than we were 6th of December last year. All those things around buses and parking, I'm suggesting that yes, there's more stuff that still needs to happen to get the conditions to give effect to some of these initiatives, but those should be informed by really good work that's happening looking into the medium and long term across a whole bunch of work streams you'll be familiar with. I mean, the city centre spatial framework's there, but the parking strategy, I understand you had a workshop on that yesterday. That work is going to have a draft parking strategy for you sometime next year. The Urban Form and Transport Initiative, extremely important piece of work and very comprehensive piece of work. Parking strategy connecting into that as well, along with the results of the Place Score survey you also had an article in the paper on this morning and heard about yesterday. That's going to deliver as well. Urban strategy sits there as a proposed document in the background, and the Te Papa spatial framework work is also going ahead at pace with design sprint work, innovation lab stuff happening later this year. So all these things that all connect to the transport proposition, the access proposition, the attraction proposition for the city centre, and can capably inform what should we do in terms of smart initiatives in the space of public transport or in terms of parking subsidy and such. My recommendation is to look at those as things which maybe can happen quickly but aren't decisions you make today to support any one or more initiatives, because there are real opportunities to do it in a way that connects with these more strategic pieces of work that are well in train. So that was the presentation I wanted to give, and hopefully this kind of consolidates what we can fund and do right now versus stuff that sensibly, maybe we should just leave for a little bit. Sally Cook from Downtown Tauranga is here. I can answer any questions.
Just if that's around 140,000 there in that top left-hand corner, where would that funding come from? And I'm asking Paul, I think. And is it feasible, Paul, for that money to come out of the parking revenue?
Through the chair, yes, it is feasible, but it is worth noting that activity currently is running at deficit. That deficit will continue to grow unless there is actually a change and an increase in pricing levels going forward. The quantum of that obviously is not going to make a massive impact on that deficit level.
It's not in deficit because of anything to do with Harrington Street. It's just deficit. Yeah.
Because of the cost of that building, and that is repaid back over time, yes. But it had a level of price increases going forward to fund that through the long-term plan. Any deviation from it, any reduction from that does impact obviously on that any surplus deficit of that activity.
But is it a current deficit of actual cash flow, and if so, how much?
Sorry, not at this point in time, but it's forecast to go into deficit, yeah.
Just following on from that, wouldn't the deficit also be because we've reduced the amount of parking? There's probably hundreds of car parks now that are no longer there, so you're not getting the revenue from those either.
Absolutely, and it is that balance of, changes in pricing levels obviously impact occupancy as well, so it is a balance effectively of how that is actually taken forward.
Thank you. And my question, maybe through the chair, I don't know if Sally's still here, marketing care package for city centre, isn't that business as usual for a Main Street to be marketing?
I did. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. We already do all of our marketing and advertising, etc. When we came to you with this package, it was seen as not as business as usual because we already have a full marketing program. We are doing a marketing program, a special care package for our members from now until December because of the crisis that the city centre is in, to allow Main Street to continue with its normal program of marketing and advertising, which is all fully committed, has been since July of this year. We're just asking for some partnership support from Tauranga City Council to help our members as per the discussions that we've had to date.
Yeah, through the chair, question to Sally, if I may. What's the current spend on marketing and collateral at the moment for the city centre? What are how much, what's being budgeted to be spent over, because I assume this is going to be over the next couple of months, 3 months. How much is currently budgeted to be spent on marketing and collateral over the next, say, 3 months? What's the current budget? Just so we know what share we're picking up here.
This is proposed for January forward, not for the next 3 months, so we're already spending our marketing budget from now until Christmas on marketing and promotions for the city centre. So that proposal was proposed as a possible care package that we requested that you looked at from January forward.
Can I ask, the question still applies, I'm interested to know how much is, sorry, thank you. I'm interested to know how much is currently budgeted over the period we're planning to spend this, and the BAU spend in terms of marketing and collateral. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested to know what share we're picking up. Can that information be shared? Or?
I'd probably have to email you through the marketing plan from the now till Christmas and through January forward, because it runs across a variety of different promotions and activities. Like we've just come off the back of Taste Tauranga, where we did a major promotion, and now we're running through to Christmas with our own care package, which is the same cost as what you see there, plus we're doing our Christmas promotions and all our other promotions that we do for the city centre. So it varies from month to month, but we have a full marketing program through Main Street that we can share. But yeah, that's a small portion compared to our full marketing budget for the year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to staff. Reading the recommendation, it's just to receive the report. Is that could, there's options in there, but there's just a recommendation to receive, so we're just receiving the report, or is there a recommended option, or is there anything recommended by staff other than receiving the report?
There's options on page 162, I believe.
So, just quickly, I've got on page 3, you've basically got a straw man from the last report on the Activate Vacant Spaces initiative, and a note there saying the discussion at this meeting on the back of the workshop from last week may mean that is substantially changed if you choose to support any additional initiatives or swap out the Activate for other initiatives in their place. So I've put the options in there as a straw man. I've just left, in terms of the recommendation, I've been silent on that until really left that to you guys to craft on the back of the workshop. This has all happened quite quickly, so yeah, that sounds great.
Brown, did you have a? Councillor Malloy and then Baldock, sorry. Yeah.
I sort of I struggle a bit with this. I think you all know my points of view. I've been banging on about them for 2.5 years. It hasn't changed. The situation has only got worse, and sadly, it's not going to get better in the next year. I don't believe, and it could take quite a bit longer. A lot of what you see up there is we've sort of been doing already, and you do what you've always done and you expect a different result. There's something wrong there. The activation of vacant spaces is not. That's one area that we could work on, and I believe that is a good initiative. Marketing, I have some concerns about until we get something in the CBD that's going to respond to that marketing. We have to be very careful about marketing something and not having a different offer. So the activation of vacant spaces is going to help there. But the two things this council can do, I think, to make a difference there is make it easy to get here and easy to stay. There's a whole lot of options in that, but it has to be a marked difference, I believe. A little bit of a tweak here and a tweak there isn't going to do it. It's not going to do it. I mean, we can throw our hands in the air and say, okay, guys, sorry, there's another 100 of you that are going to go to the wall in the next 18 months, 2 years. That's tough. If you're prepared to say that, that's okay. Or either that or we need to get stuck in and do something that's considerably different. Easy to get here, easy to stay. We can do something. The great experience, I think, that is or a good experience, is something that we had to partner with Main Street to try and provide something there. So I think they are the things that I'd put my effort in. And easy to get here, we have to do quite a bit of work on that. The likes are looking at the bus systems, making sure that there's the advertising around, so when people are coming into the city, they know exactly where to go to get the spaces that are there. Easy to stay here. We have to make sure that their experience, parking experience, or the ability to get here, and all that experience is good, and then the good experience once they get here. So when you're considering all these, I think we have to really keep that in mind. If we keep doing what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always got, and at the moment, that is not good for the businesses in the CBD. It is not good at all.
Jerry, can I just ask, when easy to get here and then the next bit, easy to stay, so what would you feel about the value of free 2-hour parking?
I've always been supportive of that. I understand it is not the panacea. It's not going to solve all the problems, but it's a lot of what we have to do is about signalling, I think, both to the business community and the wider community that we are doing something, we're open for business, and we want you down here.
So Baldock and Clout, I'm not sure which order you want to go.
I'll pull rank.
Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Baldock. This is, this is it's a question to staff, more than anything. If we were of a mind as elected members to, given that, there's an election coming up, there's going to be some disruption. If we were of a mind to provide what we might call a bulk fund, to then have allocated to various initiatives to support the CBD in the next 6 to 12 months, would that be a process that you would feel comfortable with? And if that's the case, then we'd have to decide what that would be.
The answer is yes.
Baldock and Curac.
Just around the free buses, Sally, into the city centre, I'm not confident that the regional council will have a ticketing system running any time this side of Christmas. And if they did, if it did, it would still take a lot of working out the bugs. The idea of these $10 things for employees and for customers and stuff. What is the general feeling amongst the members of Main Street to try that out? It's not going to be, it is going to cost money, because you're thinking about lots of them. But what is the view?
We have, as mentioned last time, put a survey out to our members to ask them how supportive they would be to encourage their employees and staff to use free bus passes if they had them into the city to try and help out with parking availability. We're happy to go and ask them further questions. I can only speak anecdotally at the moment from some of those members who have spoken to us. They're open to any options that will encourage more people into the city. And the feedback we've had to date is that, yes, that idea of buses came out of a Main Street meeting with members, a couple of Main Street meetings actually. So we believe there's fairly good support for it. There are some members who haven't vocalised to date, so I can't speak for all members, but we could certainly ask them again if you like. But I believe they would be largely supportive of it because they see it as assisting with access.
Sally, in terms of options to bring more people in, obviously that's the result that you're looking for. So looking at solutions or offerings to attract people, hypothetically, if you had a bit of funding, and that funding could either purchase the activation, or if you had a choice, 2-hour free parking, I'm not sure the cost of that, if it's around the same, where would Main Street be?
I should qualify that the board would probably want to have some discussion on that, but the discussion that we've had to date and the discussion that board and management and a lot of our members concur with is that the Activate Vacant Spaces initiative has the potential to draw more people in because it provides attractions and experiences in the city centre. So you've got to have a reason, a lot of different reasons for them to come into the city centre, whether it's to shop, dine, work, play, or be entertained. So I personally have the view, and from a marketing perspective, that the Activate Vacant Spaces will provide reasons for people to come into the city centre. Any very vibrant city centre across the world, people will make their ways to it to see the attractions that are in there, and they will find a way of getting in, whether it's on free buses or parking elsewhere, etc.
Clarify that is subject to a board decision, and I know you're in that marketing space, so
yes,
perhaps others aren't, and they might have a bigger buy into the 2-hour free parking. So,
and look, the board wanted us to table the Activate Vacant Spaces program first and foremost. The other initiatives came out of workshops and discussions with yourselves and elected members and members of Main Street, but by and large the Activate Vacant Spaces initiative was seen as the best option initially to move forward with.
2-hour free parking was amongst those others?
2-hour free parking didn't come from us, that came from another discussion.
Councillor Morris and Robson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just trying to clarify where the money's coming from. So in paragraph 6 of the report talks about it being rates funded, but I've also heard of something around funding via the parking activity which is in deficit. So, were we borrowing? Forecast deficit, okay. So, would we then end up be borrowing for OPEX and then where? So, can I just have some assistance to be clear about where the money would be coming from?
So through the chair, it could be either effectively in there. The parking activity going into deficit, quite frankly, this number is not significant in terms of what that deficit looks like. Not downplaying the size of the investment, but we will need to manage that activity going forward, regardless of any decision for it to be funded through there. So revenue and financing policy, effectively, you would be able to fund it out of either.
In terms of the funding source, if the parking activity does end up in deficit, then there'd have to be some sort of internal transfer of rates funded.
What I would suggest is, if the decision is made to do it, we could say fund it out of rate funded, and then review the funding at year end if there was any shortfall effectively in deficit there. That would allow that to be worked through, because we could look to manage it throughout the year.
For argument's sake, you would state that it would be rate funded, and then if the parking, yeah, okay.
To year end review if there was no available rates to fund it.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about the funding discussion and where that leads us in terms of the basic principles that we're supposed to be trying to run under. But I have a slightly bigger concern, and it's becoming a bit of a theme. In the workshop that we had, I raised the issue of buses from the cruise ships to come across. That was one of the issues raised. It got some discussion. I'm just not seeing it recognised here somewhere. Or is it under the free buses to the city centre? No, that's not it. Where's it gone? Because we do know that the cruise ships, when they come in, we've been given information which shows they do have an impact on the city centre. We do know that although we have nearly 3 times as many cruise ships as we once had, we're only delivering a similar number of passengers from those cruise ships to the city centre as we were delivering some time ago when that journey was free. And I made the point then, and I would like it to be part of our discussion, because to me this is about opportunity, this is about return on investment, how much ratepayer money goes in, if any, and which one delivers the biggest bang for buck. And if we got a similar penetration to the penetration we used to have when those buses were free, a crude calculation, a crude conservative calculation, delivers over 20,000 additional people into our CBD, which is significantly more than the Activate thing will deliver based on the only numbers that I've seen and relevant New Zealand numbers, the Hutt Valley experience. So, or the Hutt City experience, sorry. So I'm just trying to understand why that dropped off, what the fatal flaw was that meant that it didn't make it here.
Yeah, I just put my hand up. I was probably working at some awful hour pulling this together, and I probably should have added that in. In fact, I should have. There were 2 aspects that aren't on that clearly. That should be. They are in the notes that are tabled from the workshop. One of them is the shuttles from the port, and the other is a circulating shuttle around the CBD. It was suggested by a 15-minute kind of regular shuttle that goes around destinations or the perimeter of the CBD, just to help people with either getting from their car to locations or from destination to destination. So if people could forgive me for not having that on the slide, but maybe make a note that those were 2 other things, which I'd say I'd also put into that category of something to consider in the next 12 months, alongside what is rapidly emerging from the parking strategy and the urban, particularly the parking strategy and the Urban Form and Transport Initiative type of work, and the work we're doing in partnership with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council at the moment in terms of park and rides and fare review and those types of things, which are obviously tied up with their ticketing thing. So hand up, I missed getting those on there, and I should have.
The time frame for putting something like that in place, all other things being equal, is pretty damn quick. You know, it's not a short to medium term next 12-month thing. You have free buses running from there to here, PDQ. So would it not sit in immediate term approval for budget required? Would it not sit in that top left-hand box, the cruise thing? No regional council required, just a bus, get it wrapped by someone who does really good wrapping, right? City Centre Express, free to the CBD, and Murray Guy in the chair, or whoever it is, you know, got a PSV and away you go. That could be done reasonably quickly, could it not?
I haven't set up a system like that before. I would have to defer to anyone that may have expertise on that kind of thing. I thought it would have taken a bit of time to work out where to, where from, the arrangements, the commercial arrangements, the stops, the circuit, the advertising.
The simple system of pick up at the wharf or thereabouts, because you know obviously there could be issues there. Drop off in the CBD, and that's what I think we're talking about, which is a bit like chartering a bus. But yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Doug.
Just to note that Downtown Tauranga is running a shuttle system with paid service at the moment, so vastly more experienced than I am on what is involved in setting something up like that, or how it could be supported, if you wanted to talk to that.
So yes, Downtown Tauranga has been running the cruise ship shuttle bus for the last number of seasons. Last season we brought in over 20,000 people into the city centre on a paid service, and we are looking forward to running the service again this year. There is some issues around our placement on the port, but our service is still underway and ready to go. The only thing that we've always looked at it from the view of is, so we already brought in last season 20,000 people into the city centre. We look forward to potentially doing the same again on a paid service. The tourists were happy to pay. So the way Main Street look at it is that is already a self-funded service that you don't need to put any pressure on the ratepayers to cover. So why would you do that when we're already bringing them in? And that combined with the Activate Vacant Spaces program that has the potential to run all year rather than just on the cruise ship season, which is already running. So that would actually give the city centre two shots at it rather than just if you brought in free buses. The other thing to consider with the buses is that we run more than one bus to cater for that amount, supply and demand. Over the last number of seasons, each season we've had about a 25 to 30% increase in passengers, so there's been no concern over the cost of the buses. If you put them on for free, at the moment the bus service costs around circa, and don't quote me on this, I'd have to check with our budget team, but it's about $216,000 to run the bus service at the moment. If you make it free, you probably need an open checkbook.
Yeah, just in response, Rebecca, thank you. To me, it's just about bang for buck, right? So if the penetration when it's free is more than twice what it is when you're charging $15, or I understand it's something around that, if that penetration is twice as much, that's really good bang for buck. You bring in 20,000 people. And people attract investment. If you've got footfall in a place, right? If you've got people in the place, people go, there's people there, that's where I'm going to go to market. And it's a lot easier to work that way around than asking people to go to put up a market and hope people come. If you deliver the people there. So what I'm getting at is that there is already stuff there. People come to the CBD to shop.
We're entering into ideas and things here. It's just ridiculous.
Keep it going. I hate to throw something else into the mix, but something's been raised with me that if we use ratepayers' money to pay for buses from the Mount Main Street will probably be extremely unhappy. So that is just another thing to chuck into the mix, but it has been raised with me already. So Councillor Brown, were you, and then I was going over to the other side. I've got several people over here.
A question, if I may, to Sally, in terms of the Activate Spaces, which I think we need to do because we need to give people a reason to come here first. The 63,000 shortfall, how confident are you that that can be raised through other funding partners or other funding mechanisms?
It's not going to be a walk in the park by any stretch. We arrived at the figure of 100,000 because we tried to find a figure that we thought might be palatable with the elected members. That then gives us a chance to go back to stakeholders and say, look, we've got some foundation funding from Tauranga City Council. Will you join us in this initiative? So until we have those discussions, I can't give you an answer to that at the moment, Councillor Brown. We would hope that we would work very hard to get the funding that we need to deliver the program, because I think it's essential for the city centre.
Supplementary, if we did put together a package, but of that 100,000 was ring fenced for the activate vacant spaces. If you weren't able to secure the extra funding, what would happen to this opportunity or to this initiative?
Well, we'd have to go back to the drawing board and see how we're going to move forward on it. We've done the budgeting based on other centres throughout the country, so we would have to look at, you know, how else can we actually achieve that initiative. In most other centres throughout the country, they're fully funded by council, so we've tried to look at some sort of PPP model that might be palatable to give us a way forward.
Yeah, Sally, in regards to the vacant spaces, can you give us a little bit more clarity on what you're intending to do? You know, from what I can gather. No, I'm talking. You know, I can see lots of art things. I'm just asking you, what are you going to throw into these places? What sort of activities? In other words, how are you going to create that interest for people to come in? Shopping, that John just mentioned before, shopping's a big, yeah, well, I'm not going to shop too much in here as regards to the others that they've got on the likes of the lakes and the bay fairs, etc. What are you going to do? What are you going to do to excite these people? A little bit of arty-party stuff or what? What are you going to do?
We have a range of initiatives that we can look. We will be collaborating, if you look at the business plan, with sectors across the community, whether it's window displays that Creative Bay Plenty have said that they would like to look at doing. If you walk through Red Square recently, there was an example of the sort of installations that we could do that was in there. We can look at art displays, we can look at workshops, we can look at, there's a huge range of different activations from community groups and the likes.
Okay, so so in your eyes there's a huge amount to do. So you're going to have these things on a rotational basis, you know, to stop the boredom setting in with people coming in. So in other words, what I'm saying is, for this money to spend, how are you going to keep that interest there?
So the program is based on each month you would have different activations so that you're always having fresh offerings in the city centre and diversity of those offerings across the community groups. So yes, you would, the whole point with the Activate Vacant Spaces program is that you have a curated program so that what you have is quality offerings. So it's not just anything that could happen at the moment. It's over and above that so that we can actually curate to get really good offerings in the city centre, whether it's from the art sector, the cultural sector, music. There's all sorts of different aspects that we could bring into the Activate Vacant Spaces program.
So you're not quite confident, you're very confident that you can pull the people.
If the offerings are there and the attractions are there and it's well marketed, you can draw people into an attraction.
Can I just clarify with Paul, please, with the funding issue, because I am actually averse to rate funding going to this when we have parking revenue derived from the city centre. And I don't know why the wording would be rate funded, you know, at the end of the year, why it can't be parking revenue, and if it goes into a big hole, I mean, we can fix up the parking account with an increase in parking fees, you know, wherever, at some point in the future. I know we wouldn't do it now, but, you know, it's going to go up one day.
Correct, it can be either way. As I said, revenue and financing allows for either. So parking activity can be used, and because it is restricted around the CBD, that's absolutely valid.
So at some point, Your Worship, I'd like to move, because we are going to sit here all night talking about options.
No, he's going to move. What I was going to suggest, John, is that Your Worship, whatever you like to be called, I'm concerned that we're going round in circles here. We're going to finish up with something that's half-baked, that's not really what's going to provide an answer. But I'd like to suggest, as you did, Your Honour, that we have a small working party, and that we with Main Street, with 2 or 3 councillors that are prepared to sit down, and with staff, we come back with our proposals to make a difference on the 17th.
Prepared to move something?
Rather than try and nut something out now.
I do have someone who's signalled they want to move, so I'll take something from Councillor Brown and I'll come back to you two gentlemen.
Councillor Clout did send a suggestion, but I have actually sent a counter offer, if you like, suggestion back.
Ready to move, Your Worship. So I just emailed something through to Robin, and we can amend it as we go. So which will obviously be B, because the first part is we are receiving the report, which is A, and then B, which will be slightly amended to what I sent you, Robin. That council provides a bulk fund of $150,000 to promote the city centre for the, have you got it on that? For the period to 30 June 2020. With such decisions on expenditure to be delegated to the Chief Executive, to be funded from the parking activity, subject to year-end review. Well, we'll get that up there and then we can change it. Yeah. Thank you. So we'll just wait that to go up on the board. We can make any. Oh, okay. So in speaking to it, as I indicated before, we're just right in the smack middle of an election in 5 weeks' time. We're going to have, this whole process is clearly going to take quite a few months to get sorted. And so because of the disruption, I feel that we should have a bulk fund that is given to the staff to work out the best bang for the buck. And that would obviously be in consultation with downtown Tauranga, but also in terms of free bus tickets or free parking for periods of time. So let the staff work that through, and then that'll take us through till the end of June, and by which time there's plenty of opportunity for the new council to get their heads around what to do with CBD. I originally had a figure of $100,000 in mind, but I've been persuaded by some of my colleagues to be a little bit more generous. So we can just wordsmith it a little bit if required, but that's, yeah.
Speakers to this, a question and then speak. Yeah.
Just a question. My concern was, and I raised it in my email, with $100,000. So Downtown Tauranga have said they want $100,000 to activate this, but that's a 12-month program. So if we give that $100,000 now, that actually will help. That you're cutting it short by 30th of June. But if we did fund $100,000 for the Activate Spaces, you'll use that money past 30th of June?
So I'm suggesting, through the chair, I'm suggesting that, I'm not suggesting that 100,000 goes to the Activate Spaces. I'm suggesting that a portion of it may do, and the rest can go to other activities that staff feel is going to give the best bang for the buck. So it's not all going to Activate Spaces, nor does it all go to Downtown Tauranga directly.
Yeah, speaking to it, and I'm assuming now that Councillor Brown is satisfied with the response from Sally. I believe it should include the 100,000, and I think we don't have to specify it, but it's going to be left at the Chief Executive's discretion. The Activate Spaces thing has merit, but it has challenges to work through in terms of additional funding. So we make allowance for it. The other things in the box that were up there before, the short-term things, it includes all those things which the staff will look at, plus the one in the second box, which was the bus passes, if that has legs. But look, we have been sitting around for I don't know how long, coming up with our own ideas. We asked Main Street to go away and have a workshop amongst themselves with ideas. Then we had a G2G with them. They came back with a list. It is time just to put some money behind it now and let it go on and it And coming from the parking revenue, I believe it's fully justified because it is connected to the CBD, and I trust that the Chief Executive and Gareth will work out what will deliver some more feet in the street. And if not, Christmas will come and go before we've ever done anything to assist. So I hope we might just move on this one and go.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think, notwithstanding my colleagues' comments before about where the money comes from in terms of the revenue and financing policy, I think it is important. I think the word morally was probably used in relation to the earlier debate at 1 o'clock. I think we'll just leave it there. But if we're talking about the parking activity, and we know, because we're forecasting, if you didn't know, you wouldn't forecast, so we're knowingly suggesting that it comes from parking revenue, which is going to be in deficit, which means it's actually coming from the general ratepayer, which means we're actually robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Peter happens to be a retailer in Greerton and at the Mount, and both those Main Street organisations have considerably less operational costs than downtown Tauranga. And so I don't think that's right.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, please. If I could, because a point of clarification, I believe my colleague isn't fully grasping what Paul had said before, that there are ways in which that deficit can be addressed that are not by just topping it up with rate.
In the event that the activity goes into deficit, there are a number of, you know, effectively debt funds it in the short term, but then there are options to actually increase fees, look at cost structures and that going forward and the like. So it can come out of deficit without a ratepayer input.
Councillor Baldock's not going to put up parking fees. So that was actually a point of order, which was a point of debate, which was actually disagreeing, which is not a point of order. But anyway, I shall not belabour the point. If I can take the opportunity, and I acknowledge that my colleague has speaking rights after me, but I need to take the opportunity to give him a proverbial slap in terms of having a free bus from the cruise ship terminal or outside the cruise ship terminal into downtown Tauranga that's not user funded. And if we are using my previous example, taking money off Mount retailers to take their customers away, and that ain't right. I think that's not moral. Anyway, no, I'm of two minds, Your Worship. I'm going to listen to the debate. I'm of two minds as to whether I abstain from this motion, because I don't honestly have confidence in the Downtown Tauranga board, and so I don't think, but then at the same time I'm not sure why I'm feeling like that, whether it's a recent experience, and so I think the best course of action, Your Worship, is to recognise that interest and perhaps abstain.
Councillor Robson.
It always concerns me, sort of the invocation of principle selectively. It's a bit like, you know, patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel, I think the famous phrase is, or truth is the first casualty of war is another phrase for those of you who are into military things. If we use the parking revenue to fund something, the most rational thing to do will be at some point to pick up parking fees, which will have the effect of discouraging people from coming to the city centre. So what we're going to do is we're going to discourage people from coming to the city centre to get some money so we can encourage people to come to the city centre. And if that's not Kafkaesque, for those of you who are into Kafka, I don't know what is. So I think we have to think again on the funding thing. If you start thinking about we shift the burden from one place to another and disadvantage some people and advantage other people. Every decision we make does that. Every decision, every political decision is a transfer of resources generally from one group to another group. If we accept what the Productivity Commission would argue, that try and get to user pays, beneficiary pays, exacerbator pays, user fees rather than general rates, then the most rational way of funding any city centre improvements, and these are seen as benefit to the CBD, is to rate the CBD and use that money to promote the CBD. That's the most rational. Productivity Commission acknowledging, you know, leave the amount out of it, leave everyone else out of it, leave the general rate out of it. This is a benefit to the CBD, rate the CBD. If the CBD really want it, they're more than happy to pay. So I'm not prepared to support what's currently proposed, not just for that reason, but if we're going to get into that, that's the way I would like to go. That's where I went on Wharf Street, the idea of if we're going to invest in Wharf Street, then the beneficiaries of that Wharf Street pay, and I went down target rate. So I'm consistent in this. I actually submitted to the Productivity Commission. You know, I'm trying to be consistent here if one wants to get the principle thing. On specifics, I don't think Activate is going to deliver. I just don't think it's good value for money. But we do need to do something in that space. The issues are, what do we do and how do we fund it? Fund it from the rates that we collect for Main Street. Run the Main Street account internally, and I'm sure we can do this under our revenue and financing policy. Effectively run the downtown at a deficit, give them additional funding, and collect it back by increasing the rate we collect to fund them the following year. Right? Because they're the best. So bring forward the investment. The CBD lower it, downtown tell us that's what the CBD wants. So that's your funding situation sorted. No worries about rates, no worries about anyone else. Then the question is, what do we spend that money on? I'm not convinced Activate as it is. If I had my choice, I would actually commission a, I don't know, let's call it LB Enterprises for want of a name, a company that may well exist in 6 weeks' time, and see what they could do with something. Because I'm not convinced that what we've done so far has had any real effect, and I'm not convinced that what's being proposed is any different to what we've done so far. But in terms of funding, for the CBD, I can't support what's currently proposed.
At the risk of repeating myself, for quite some time I've been saying what's coming, and I haven't had a hell of a big response from my fellow councillors or this council, and everything I've been saying has been true. I've been proven correct, and we've got more coming our way. You know, if we don't have a problem, we don't have to worry about it. We can all go home, forget about it. There's no problem. If we do have a problem, we have to decide how to fix it first. Funding it is something you come to later, you know, whether we are or not, but we have to decide if we've got a problem and then how are we going to fix it. Just like to point out, you know, 5 million plus for Wharf Street, 20 million potentially for Elizabeth Street, 10 million for the Strand, 5 million for Durham or whatever it was, and I could go on and on about the investment that we're making in the city. The business space in the city is in real trouble. $100,000 isn't going to do it. I believe anything short of $1 million is a waste of time. Certainly the activation space is a help.
Excuse me, I just think appropriate meeting protocol is warranted. So if there's a conversation going on here, I think we should all be privy to it.
Happy to make you privy to it when I get the opportunity.
As I was saying, considering the investment we have in the city as a whole, and the businesses in the CBD didn't buy into what they've got at the moment, it is special. It's not happening at the Mount. It's not happening in Greaton. It's not happening anywhere else in the city. There's a special case here. As I said before, anything short of $1 million is a waste of money. I certainly back the activation space, but it's only part of a jigsaw. It's only part of the answer. So I couldn't vote against any money going forward, but I think it is far too little and probably far too late.
Point of information, just to make clear what the discussion between myself and Paul Davidson was about in response to the request from the Chief Executive to make sure that I observe meeting protocol and therefore don't have quiet discussions on the side. I made a statement about what was possible in terms of financing. What I went to Paul Davidson with was to check and make sure that I hadn't misled anyone by making that statement and get confirmation that what I said was accurate. I wouldn't want to be in a situation, as I find myself occasionally, of putting in space. I'm answering a request from the Chief Executive. It's a point of information. I'm making sure that people understand why that conversation happened. There was a request that I should, make it clear. So what I'm saying is the reason I checked was to make sure that the statement I had made had not misled people. I believe I got clarification that I didn't mislead people.
I'll just check with Paul.
Through the chair, so the conversation was just about in terms of the ability to run the Main Street Road into deficit. That's something that we've never done before. I'd need to actually go back and actually check. I don't think it is actually consistent with the way we actually go through an annual planning process, because we normally, through that process, work through a Main Street rate proposal and then target rate that across the city. So I would need to see if there is any way, but on face value, I'm not convinced that there is a way to actually do it at this point.
So I'm speaking to the recommendation on the screen. At the moment, we don't actually have the best offering for anyone to come into the city, which is quite sad, but it's reality. And we don't offer a great experience, but there is still potential there. And then on the other hand, we've got that perception. So we're never going to get people coming into the city and bringing their VFRs, they're visiting friends and relatives into the city when we don't have a great offering. So what we have to do is improve that offering that we've got, which I think that Activate Spaces is going to help with. It's not the silver bullet, but it's going to help. I think we need to address the intermediate terms and options that were on the slide, the top two, and then also consider those short-term initiatives were also on the bottom left of that screen. I'm happy to support this as $150,000 to 30th of June, but if there was a seconder, I would move that Council consider a targeted rate from 1st of July 2020 to follow on from this investment that we've got here. If we have $150,000 a year approximately by approximately 500 tenants in the main street, it's $300 a year, which is less than $1 a day. So I think that if someone was going to support it, I would move that as an additional recommendation.
Point of order, can I just request clarification on that? I mean, a targeted rate is an annual plan discussion. I don't know how this resolution would ever have any weight. I appreciate the sentiment. So, but the annual plan all of that will be dealt with by an incoming council. This resolution would be, I'd just like a response from the Chief Executive or from Paul, please, on that.
Yeah, so the issue with that would be we would be putting a resolution in place based on a future consultation which hasn't taken place. So it would be difficult to actually put it in place. Right. What we would need to do then would be to actually fund it through a general rate in the interim, and then look to consult through a targeted rate through an annual plan process.
You're saying it would carry no weight? It would be.
No. You could. Well, it would need to be consulted on as a change in revenue and financing policy through the annual plan process, and it would be in the interim, if that wasn't successful, then it would be funded through a general rate if that was the resolution that was passed.
Sorry, just another clarification I need then. If it happened, and therefore the targeted rate was put in place from 1st of July 2020, are you suggesting that it retrospectively funds this? So what is it for going forward? It doesn't say. Okay, well then it needs... It would need to say that, wouldn't it?
Sorry, but then wouldn't that just be adding on to the existing targeted rate that we have for Main Street, Tauranga anyway? So why would you have an extra one?
A targeted rate would be like rubbing salt into the wound at the moment for the businesses.
Therefore, I may as well say my piece in speaking to this at the moment. You know, when I look at all those different things, I think the one thing that would make a major change to the perception, and it's definitely, I'm not sure if Downtown Board would necessarily approve of it or not. I know some retailers do, I know a lot of the public do, and that's this idea of this 2 hours free parking. I took the liberty of phoning the Mayor of Hamilton, where the same thing has happened, and he said there's been a remarkable change of perception. And of course, perception goes a long way. So, and that is something that just would be, with all the problems of where you're going to get the money from to be fair to your outlying retailers and businesses who are paying this money, then would this not be the easiest way to, and the most justifiable way, because you could then get in the business of this parking equity where the other places don't pay for parking at all. So to give 2 hours free parking could be seen as being extremely fair and actually something that works. But anyway, that's my comment. Going around to Councillor Stewart and around the rest of the table.
Well said, Mayor Brownless. That's what I had on my notes here. 2 hour no-cost parking would provide a high benefit. I don't buy into the Activate Vacant Spaces initiative. Yeah, I'm speaking.
Hear that was being moved and seconded properly. You were discussing it. Okay, you've put the amendment up. Right, I'll hold you there.
Nearly finished.
Yeah, okay.
So, look, I'm just giving a general 2-minute spiel. So, we're in the middle of the election process, and what morphs out the other end may be some fresh ideas, and there is a problem, and Mayor Greg was quite right when he talked about parity and, you know, charging for parking. So I think Mayor Greg's probably onto it, but it'll probably be the new council that works on this ongoing problem, which has exasperated with the road closures, the road disruptions, and we've taken away so much parking. So good luck whoever has to work that out in the future.
You, an amendment. Okay, so it has been officially moved and seconded. So moved by Councillor Brown and seconded by Councillor Robson. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor Brownless. At the moment, if we do approve B, if it gets through, there's 150,000 that only takes it through to the 30th of June 2020. And then it says subject to year-end review where the money comes from, but that doesn't give this Activate Spaces program longevity, and also any other initiatives that between the councillors, staff, Downtown Tauranga, and anyone else who wants to throw their 5 cents in, the events to whoever else, it doesn't give them any certainty. By the time we actually organise something, 30th of June will be and gone, and they won't have any chance to put something in place. And some of these initiatives, like I think, you know, developing a long-term brand about changing the perception for Downtown Tauranga, and that we're changing, we're growing up, whatever it might be, isn't going to be in place and have any results by the 30th of June. So we need to give this initiative or this fund a much longer period of time to prove itself, and we know that the city's in crisis, the city centre, and it's going to be for another at least 2 years while we grow up and while we change and while we have all these disruptions in the city. So I'm trying to give this fund the length of time it needs to put some actions in place and to actually show some results. So by doing it through considering a targeted rate from the 12th, after the 1st of July for funding ongoing for the following year, the targeted rate, at the moment it'd be less than $1 a day. I'm just trying to give it some longevity and some security and certainty to Downtown Tauranga and whoever else is going to be part of this program of work.
Well said, Councillor Brown. If people are serious about committing to this, and there's a general recognition, and Councillor Malloy tells us that this transition period is going to take a while. So to give people some degree of certainty and to indicate where we believe the funding should come from, acknowledging the issues raised by Councillor Morris, it seems that we should sort of put a marker down that we'd like to see this continue. If we'd like to see it start, we'd like to see it continue for the reasons that have been outlined. And acknowledging that the beneficiaries should in fact be the funders, this seems to be a sensible amendment to add to the substantive motion. You know, really, you know, the philosophy, I suppose, is no space left empty to create a situation, you know, cynically a Potemkin village, but on a more positive note, a place that's full, a place that's complete, a place that every shopfront has something in it and something happening, be it static, dynamic, whatever. You know, you can see why we might want to do that, but the point's been made that if we say yes to this, by the time Main Street get the program duly organised and they get the additional funding required to get through the next, 9 months, right, they may well have started this and then be in a situation of not having any confirmation that we know we're going to support it or where we've given any consideration to where the funding comes from. And this seems to be a sensible addition to give them confidence that any energy they do invest in this will actually have a reasonable payback period. And if you want evidence of why that's a good idea, go and look at our place. We started off by going to fund them over a certain period of time and then found that things took a bit longer than we anticipated because we were new to it. And I think even Sally would admit that this is something new for Main Street, something new for Tauranga, something new for the CBD. It would be crazy to let them start and then let them fall into a hole. Set them up to fail. Why would we do that? If you really want this, then surely you'd support the amendment.
There's a great principle. The beneficiaries should be the funders. I must pass that on to Tommy at Te Tuinga Whānau. We've been asked to give some assistance, some short-term assistance. We have to see whether it works first. We're now leaping into the future, which is unnecessary. An annual plan will address this. Submissions can be made as to how this program is given further legs beyond the 30th of June 2020. We need to focus on what we're trying to do today. I agree with Councillor Malloy that to suggest a targeted rate would be like salt in the wound. It is just, we're trying to be giving them some encouragement that we are hearing their pain and we're trying to give some assistance to them. If it needs to be long term, if it hasn't recovered by the 30th of June, through the AP, they can suggest, it's really unusual for, I think it's even prohibited that we can instruct Main Street that we're going to increase rates for Main Street. That's not going to work. It's going to have to be a completely separate target rate. Last time we tried that, because of the pain in the CBD, they reacted to it. We were trying to impose a 20% of the 20 million, and they said, well, you can't do that yet. So I don't know. Please. I do not support the amendment. I'm sorry.
I hear what speakers say, but at the end of the day, we're providing direction for staff that we as a council want this considered during the next annual plan. And it gives a heads up to Main Street for the board to discuss it with their membership. It's not a given, we're not saying it's going to happen, but perhaps it is the solution to extend the funding that's proposed in Resolution B. And I'd like the term promote change to assist, because Councillor Baldock used the word assistance. So to promote, that's where I struggle with, because promote means you're spending money to promote the CBD over other retail destinations who will be disadvantaged from that. And promote also means that it's marketing, but assist would also help the mayor's proposal to assist with parking, because so that assists the city centre. So I'd like that sort of considered.
I'm happy to, as the mover, I'm happy to change promote to assist. I don't think if it helps get Mr. Councillor Kurak over the line, I'm okay with that.
Will be supported. Yeah, we're just out of context there. So the amendment I do support in principle.
I can't support it. I can take you probably to 12 businesses that are ready to pull the pin. If I went in and told them they're going to be targeted rate to help with their survival, I would get a very, very short message.
Okay, so I'll put the amendment to the vote. All in favour of the amendment, raise your hand. So there's Councillor Robson, Brown, Kurak and Granger, and those against, there's Councillor Stewart, Councillor Baldock, Clout, Malloy and myself. So that is lost. An abstention from Councillor Morris. Right, now back to the substantive motion.
I'm very happy to change the word promote to assist without going through any palaver or amendment.
Okay. No palaver here. Other speakers? Yeah, Councillor Kurak.
I certainly heard what Councillor Robson said about Peter Payne Paul, but the CBD is in a crisis. So that sort of compensates for that principle. So when I weigh up the need versus, in terms of the funding, the need gets me home on this one. So I will support it. The city centre is in a crisis.
Okay, you have spoken, so we better play it fair. Yeah. Councillor Granger.
Yeah, look, I will support it. Someone's got their microphone on too. Councillor Kurak's dead right. It is in a crisis, and the developments happening around the CBD certainly hasn't helped, and it's caused some major problems at Durham Street, caused other ones as well. It's just that I just want to see in the next 9 or 10 months, I want to see some action. I'm prepared to put $150,000 there, so I just do want some response back.
Thank you. I hope the folks at home watching this are enjoying the spectacle. Anyway, look, rather than, I don't want to get involved with fiddling with the funding, and I think we've sort of gone down that track, so I feel quite happy with the wording that we've got there. Remember, not all of this funding is designated to Main Street Tauranga. It's actually our staff are going to look at other ways of assisting the city centre. So let's not get too hung up on that. Sorry, Terry, you mentioned $1 million. That's not a bridge too far. It's a bridge, motorway and underpass too far. So I think we've sort of settled on a figure that I think is actually quite reasonable and will show some, I think, good faith to our downtown retailers, particularly those that are struggling.
So I'll put that by show of hand. All in favour, raise your hand. So there's Councillor Granger, Kurak, Baldock, Clout, Malloy and Brown, and against is Councillor Robson and myself, and abstention, and Stewart, and abstention, you're abstaining, right. Okay, so abstentions are from Councillor Morris and Stewart. So that's carried. Thank you. I mean, I think it's been a good discussion. We've all had different ideas. My preference, which is for the free 2-hour parking, was lost, but I hope to bring that back at some stage because I believe that would make all the difference.
Staff may choose to allocate some of that.
Well, if that's the case, I would change my vote. But in any case, I'm sure it will. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Your Worship.
Yes.
The appointed hour has arrived.
Yeah.
I'm prepared to move the delegations that are required very quickly without going to a motion to extend our time, if that would be acceptable to everybody, because it's the last of the open sessions, and I do not see why we need to have a big debate about that. But if it's going to require debate, then we need to move a motion to extend. We are 8 hours since the meeting has started.
We will go to DC 282, and unless there are questions, I will ask for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Bullock, seconded by Councillor Clout. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Yep. So we now, as the appointed hour, to move into confidential unless there are substantial reasons. Okay. Okay, so who's going to move into confidential? Councillor Clout, and seconded by Councillor Granger. All in favour say aye. Against, so that's carried.
Mayor Greg,
Yes.
before we go into confidential, what was the decision on that bringing out the document that I referred to earlier?
Through the chair, would be happy with Appendix A, but not the report and not Appendix B, because they both contain financial information that we would be uncomfortable having in the open.
Thank you.
Appendix A, at what point would we move that out then? Following the meeting,
Following the meeting,
because we've
yeah.
moved into confidential, so I think rather than mucking around, yeah.